You know what's funny about life-changing moments? They start just like any other day. That morning was no different. I remember it perfectly. A regular Tuesday in October, the kind where everything feels so normal it's almost boring. I was in my workshop finishing up Mrs. Peterson's old Chevy, the same one she's been bringing in for 15 years, practically held together by hope and duct tape at this point. The familiar smell of motor oil and coffee filled the air, and I could hear Jimmy, my best mechanic, cursing at a particularly stubborn transmission in the back. 15 years of marriage to Katie, and our routine was as comfortable as my old work boots. She'd kiss me goodbye every morning, always with that little smile that made her nose scrunch up. "Don't forget to eat lunch," she'd say, like I was still that workaholic she met all those years ago. And I'd pretend to be annoyed, but we both knew I loved it. That morning, she'd left early for some big presentation at her office. "It's going to be a crazy day," she'd said, adjusting her blazer in that nervous way she had. "Don't wait up tonight. Might have to work late." I'd nodded, gave her a quick peck, and went back to my coffee. 15 years teaches you the rhythms of a marriage, when to push and when to let things slide. The garage was doing well, not making us millionaires, but steady enough. We had our house in the suburbs, weekend barbecues with friends, and those little traditions that make up a life together, like how we'd always split the last bite of dessert, or how she'd laugh at my terrible dad jokes even though she'd heard them 100 times. Looking back now, I wonder if I should have seen it coming. They say hindsight's 20/20, but that's bullshit. Hindsight is more like one of those funhouse mirrors. It distorts everything, makes you see monsters in ordinary shadows. But that morning, everything was just normal. Perfect, even, in that quiet way you never appreciate until it's gone. I remember checking my phone during lunch break, seeing a text from her. "Super busy day. Love you." 3 words and a heart emoji, our usual shorthand for the comfortable affection of long-term love. I sent back a thumbs up and went back to work, not knowing that in a few hours those would be the last honest words she'd say to me. That's the thing about trust. It's like air. You never think about it until it's gone. And man, was I about to have all the air sucked out of my world. I came home early that day. Mrs. Peterson's Chevy had finally given up the ghost, and I didn't have the heart to tell her it was beyond saving just yet. The house was quiet, that weird kind of quiet that makes you notice things you usually don't, like how the afternoon sun hit the kitchen counter at just the right angle to make everything look a little sharper, a little clearer. That's when I saw it, a package sitting on the kitchen island. Not some Amazon box or regular delivery, but one of those fancy gift boxes with the magnetic closure and thick ribbon. The kind you get from those places where they actually wrap things for you because you're spending enough to make it worth their while. Something about it made my stomach twist. Maybe it was how carefully it was placed, right in the center, like a museum piece. Or maybe it was because I knew I hadn't ordered anything like that. But I stood there for a good minute, just staring at it like it might explode. When I finally picked it up, it felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with its actual weight. The ribbon was deep burgundy, the box a sleek black with gold embossing from some high-end restaurant I'd never heard of. Le Petit Jardin, where an appetizer probably cost more than the oil changes I did all day. Inside, everything was arranged with the kind of precision that screams special occasion. A bottle of champagne that I recognized from those best-of lists that pop up around New Year's. Definitely not our usual special occasion wine from the grocery store. 2 crystal champagne flutes, each engraved with "An Unforgettable Night" in elegant script. And there, tucked beneath the tissue paper, a small card. My hands were steady as I opened it. Funny how your body sometimes doesn't get the memo that your world is about to change. The message was simple. Can't wait for tonight with you. No signature, no explanation, just 11 words that somehow managed to erase 15 years of trust in about 5 seconds. I set everything back exactly as I'd found it, making sure the ribbon lay just right. Then I walked to the living room, sat down in my favorite chair, and pulled out my phone. Katie was still in meetings according to her status. I opened my laptop, the one we shared because why do we need two when we trust each other completely? Time to see just how unforgettable this night was going to be. It's amazing how much of your life ends up in your email. 15 years of shared passwords, shared accounts, shared everything, because that's what couples do, right? We trust, we share, we don't keep secrets. The restaurant's confirmation email was right there in her inbox, bold and unread. Le Petit Jardin, tonight at 8 p.m. Table for two, special romantic setting requested. Special note, champagne service as discussed. I felt like I was reading someone else's mail, except this was my wife, planning a night I wasn't supposed to know about. My hands weren't quite as steady anymore as I dug deeper. Her phone synced to our shared cloud, another thing we did because we had nothing to hide. The message thread labeled David Work went back 3 months. I hadn't even questioned it. Why would I? She'd mentioned a new project manager, just another guy at the office. Except project managers don't text at 2 a.m. They don't send messages like, miss your smile, or can't stop thinking about yesterday. They don't make plans for working late that somehow involve hotel reservations. The Marriott confirmation glowed on my screen. One night, king bed, premium view. Special requests, rose petals, champagne setup, the kind of thing I used to do for her back when I thought romance meant grand gestures instead of just being there every damn day for 15 years. I found myself doing the math. 3 months of messages, dozens of late meetings, countless work dinners. Each discovery was like turning over a rock and finding something ugly underneath. Times she'd been too tired, days she'd been too busy, all those little moments that hadn't seemed important enough to question. The worst part? The absolute worst part was finding my own messages to her, scattered between her conversations with him. My simple, love you texts. My mundane questions about dinner plans. My stupid dad jokes that she always claimed to love. They sat there like evidence of my own blind trust, each one a testament to how completely I'd been fooled. I checked the time, 3:47 p.m., a little over 4 hours until their unforgettable night. The phone in my hand buzzed, another message from her. Still stuck in meetings, don't wait up. I stared at that heart emoji for a long moment. Then I opened the restaurant's website and found their contact information. If this night was going to be unforgettable, it might as well be unforgettable for everyone involved. You ever have one of those moments where you feel completely calm, even though you know you should be losing it? That's where I was at 4 p.m., sitting in my home office, making phone calls like it was just another Tuesday afternoon. My voice didn't shake. My hands were steady. I felt like I was watching myself from somewhere far away. Yes, I'd like to modify a reservation, I told the restaurant manager. It's under Catherine Reynolds for tonight at 8. A pause while she checked. Yes, that's correct. I'm her husband, Paul Reynolds. I'd like to make some changes. The manager was delighted to help. Amazing what dropping the word anniversary can do. Table for 2 became a table for 12. I requested it be set up exactly as planned. Champagne, flowers, the works, just bigger. Next call. Mike and Sarah, our oldest friends. Hey, want to help me surprise Katie tonight? Dinner at Le Petit Jardin. Dress nice? Then Tom and Lisa. Then Katie's sister Emma and her husband. Her parents, my brother. Each call adding another piece to the puzzle, none of them questioning why they were being invited to a last-minute dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. I kept it casual, fun, even. Just a special surprise, I told them all. Don't spoil it by calling Katie. They ate it up. Paul Reynolds, the romantic husband, planning a surprise dinner for his hard-working wife. If they only knew. The hotel cancellation was next. Yes, under Catherine Reynolds, something came up. The clerk didn't even blink. I wondered how many affairs had ended with similar calls. 5:30 p.m. More messages from Katie. meeting running late, and so stressed. Each lie another brick in the wall I was building around her perfect little evening. I showered, shaved, put on my best suit, the one she'd bought me for our last anniversary. Ironic choice, but hey, might as well look good for the show. The cologne she loved, the watch she gave me for Christmas, every detail perfect, just like her planned evening was supposed to be. Last step, I typed out a group text to everyone except Katie. Table reserved for 7:45. Remember, it's a surprise. Then I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie, rehearsing the lines I'd spent the last few hours crafting. The thing about revenge is, it's not about making yourself feel better. It's about making sure the other person never forgets how they made you feel. And tonight was going to be unforgettable, all right. Just not in the way she planned. Le Petit Jardin looked exactly like you'd expect. All soft lighting and exposed brick, with those little tea lights that make everything look like a movie scene. I arrived at 7:30, early enough to make sure everything was perfect. The maitre d' greeted me by name, all smooth professionalism and knowing smiles. If he thought it was odd that a table for two had morphed into a party of 12, he didn't show it. "Your guests will begin arriving shortly, Mr. Reynolds," he said, leading me to our table, or rather tables, since they'd had to push several together to accommodate everyone. "We've arranged everything as requested. The champagne will be served upon your signal." I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The fancy place settings, the flickering candlelight, the two special champagne flutes, identical to the ones in that package, placed right where Katie would sit. Everything looking like a perfect romantic evening, right down to the rose petals scattered across the white tablecloth. My phone buzzed. "Katie, finally done. Getting ready now. Can't wait to relax." I checked the time, 7:40. She had no idea she was texting the wrong date. Mike and Sarah arrived first, dressed to the nines. "Paul!" Mike's face lit up. "Man, you really went all out. Katie's gonna flip." If he only knew. Then Tom and Lisa, then Emma and her husband. Katie's parents arrived looking excited. Her mom already had that misty-eyed look she got at special occasions. My brothers slipped in with a low whistle at the setup. One by one, our closest friends and family filled the seats, all of them beaming at me like I was husband of the year. "When's Katie getting here?" Emma asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "And why didn't she tell me about this?" "It's a surprise," I said, checking my watch. 7:55 p.m. She should be here any minute. The maitre d' appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Reynolds, a gentleman just called asking about a reservation under Catherine Reynolds. I informed him the reservation had been modified." I smiled. "Perfect. And what time is his reservation at?" 8 p.m., sir." "Excellent." I stood up, straightening my tie. "Everyone, Katie will be here very soon, but first, I need to tell you all something. You see, this evening isn't exactly what you think it is." I could feel their eyes on me as I began to explain the package, the messages, the hotel reservation. With each word, their expression shifted from excitement to shock, then to anger on my behalf. By the time I finished, the air was thick with tension. "She's coming here to meet him," I concluded, just as my phone lit up with another message from Katie. "Just parking. See you soon." Only she wasn't texting me. She was texting him. And in about 2 minutes, she was going to walk through that door expecting a romantic evening with her lover, only to find her entire world waiting for her instead. The thing about watching your wife walk into a restaurant to meet her lover is that you notice every detail, like how she'd worn that black dress, the one I bought her last Christmas. How she'd done her hair the way she used to do it for our date nights, back when we still had those. How her steps faltered when she saw me, just for a fraction of a second, before her social smile clicked into place. "Paul?" Her voice hit that high note of surprise that I'd heard 1,000 times before, except now I could hear the fear underneath it. What's everyone doing here?" I stood up, champagne glass in hand. The same brand she'd picked out for her special evening. "Honey, you made it!" My voice carried across the restaurant, cheerful and loud. I was starting to worry. She stood frozen in the entrance, her eyes darting around the table. Her parents, her sister, our friends. All of them watching her with expressions that had shifted from excitement to something else entirely. I don't understand," she managed, her hand clutching her purse like a shield. "What is this?" "Well," I said, still smiling, "when I found that beautiful gift package you left on the counter, the champagne, the special glasses, the sweet note, I just knew this evening had to be special." I held up one of the engraved flutes. An unforgettable night, right? The color drained from her face. Behind her I could see the maitre d' quietly turning away another guest, a well-dressed man who took one look at our gathering and quickly retreated. David, I presumed, making his exit before the show really began. "I thought," I continued, my voice carrying in the now silent restaurant, "why keep such a romantic evening just between two people? These kinds of moments should be shared with everyone we love, don't you think?" Emma's sharp intake of breath told me she'd figured it out. Katie's mother's hand was over her mouth. Mike was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched. "Paul, please," Katie whispered, taking a step toward me. "We can talk about this at home." "Oh, but I already made all the arrangements," I said, my smile never wavering. "Even called the Marriott to adjust your reservation. Though I guess your special guest for the evening won't be needing that king-size bed after all." The silence that followed was absolute. Katie stood there, mascara starting to smear as tears welled up in her eyes. Her father had his arm around her mother, who was quietly crying. Our friends sat rigid in their chairs, witnesses to the execution of a 15-year marriage. "Would anyone else like some champagne?" I asked, picking up the bottle. "It's a really excellent vintage. Katie picked it out specially for tonight, though I don't think it was meant for quite this many glasses." Katie finally found her voice. How did you find out?" I finished for her. "Honey, you really should be more careful with your passwords. But then again, I guess that's what happens when you trust someone completely for 15 years. You get careless." They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is how your hands start shaking once it's done, how the adrenaline crashes, how reality comes rushing in like a tidal wave. Katie had collapsed into a chair, her perfect makeup running in black streaks down her face. The restaurant had gone so quiet, you could hear the candles flickering. Somewhere in the kitchen, a plate clattered, making everyone jump. "I think," her father said, standing up slowly, "we should go." His voice was steady, but his hands were trembling as he helped his wife up. I'd never seen him look so old. "Catherine, we'll talk tomorrow." They filed out one by one, our friends and family, each exit like a small funeral procession. Some touched my shoulder as they passed. Others couldn't meet my eyes. Emma stopped to hug me, whispering, "Call me if you need anything," before following her parents. Soon it was just us, sitting at a table meant for 12, surrounded by half-empty champagne glasses and wilting rose petals. Was it worth it? Katie's voice was barely audible. Humiliating me like this? I looked at her across the table, really looked at her. 15 years of memories sat between us like a wall. First date, wedding day, house hunting, all those small moments that make up a life together, now tainted by the knowledge that she could throw it all away for some hotel room rendezvous. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Was he worth it?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. It's not what you think." "Really?" I picked up my phone, pulled up the messages I'd found. "Miss your smile. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. Can't wait for tonight." Each quote landed like a body blow. What exactly am I misunderstanding here, Katie? "We were going to tell you," she whispered. After tonight." I laughed then, a hollow sound that scared even me. "Oh, that's considerate. Have your romantic evening first, then break the news. Very thoughtful. The maitre d' appeared silently at my elbow with the check. I pulled out my wallet, noticed my hands were shaking. The numbers on the bill blurred, appetizers and champagne for 12 that nobody had touched. "I've already taken care of it," Katie said quietly. It was on my card anyway." Of course it was. I stood up, straightening my tie one last time. "Well, since you've paid for it, you might as well stay and enjoy your evening. Though I think your date might have found other plans." "Paul, please, where are you going?" I looked down at her, this woman I'd loved for 15 years, this stranger wearing my wife's face. "Home, to pack your things. I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay tonight. Maybe call David, though he seems to have a habit of disappearing when things get complicated." As I walked out, I heard her start to cry in earnest. Part of me wanted to turn back, to comfort her, like I had for 15 years. But that part was dying, replaced by something harder and colder with each step I took. The valet brought my car around. I could see my reflection in the window, still wearing the suit she bought me, still looking like the man who walked in here thinking revenge would feel like victory. Instead, it felt like ashes in my mouth. I drove home in silence, the taste of expensive champagne still bitter on my tongue. It's weird how quiet a house can be when your whole life is falling apart. I stood in our bedroom, no, my bedroom now, staring at her side of the closet. 15 years of shared space reduced to the question of what to pack first. I pulled out her suitcase, the big one we'd used for our trip to Hawaii last year. Had she been seeing him then? Had she been thinking of him while we walked on the beach, while we made plans for our future? I sat on the bed, the suitcase empty beside me, suddenly unsure if I could do this. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the restaurant. Emma, Mike, her parents, everyone wanting to check on me, to offer support, to say how sorry they were. I turned it off. Their sympathy felt like sandpaper on raw skin. Instead of packing, I found myself walking through the house, really seeing it for the first time in years. All those photos on the walls, vacations, anniversaries, family gatherings, her reading glasses still on the coffee table, her coffee mug in the sink from this morning, 1,000 little pieces of our life together, now more like evidence than memories. In the kitchen, that damn package was still sitting there. I picked it up, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to destroy, 15 years. The champagne bottle was still cool. She'd planned everything so carefully. 2 crystal flutes, now a matched set of lies. I hurled the package against the wall, watching it shatter. The sound was satisfying in a way the restaurant scene hadn't been. The champagne spread across the floor like blood, soaking into the grout between the tiles. One of the flutes had survived the impact, mocking me with its pristine engraving, "An Unforgettable Night." I picked it up, studying how the light caught the crystal. Katie had always had expensive taste. I wondered if David knew what he was getting himself into. David. I pulled my laptop over, hand steady now. Amazing how focus returns when you have a purpose. His LinkedIn profile was easy to find. Regional sales manager, married, 2 kids, a family man. I wondered if his wife had any packages waiting at home for her. The sound of a car pulling up made me freeze. Headlights swept across the kitchen wall, then went dark. Keys in the door. Katie's steps, hesitant now, where they used to be confident. I didn't turn around. Just sat there at the kitchen island, the surviving champagne flute in one hand, her lover's life story open on my laptop. Behind me, she stopped short, probably seeing the broken glass, the spreading stain on the floor. "You should be careful," I said, my voice sounding strange in the quiet house. "The crystal makes the floor slippery. Wouldn't want you to fall and hurt yourself. At least, not until I figure out if David's wife would like to know about your special evening together." "You wouldn't." Katie's voice shook. She was still wearing that black dress, but now it looked like funeral attire. "Paul, that would destroy his family." Funny how that works, isn't it? I spun the laptop around so she could see. 2 kids, Sarah and Michael. Ages 10 and 8. Cute kids. They have his eyes. I clicked through the photos. Look at this one. Family vacation to Disney World just 3 months ago, right around when you two started texting. She stepped closer, glass crunching under her heels. It's not... we haven't... Haven't what? Slept together? I laughed, the sound sharp as the broken crystal between us. Is that supposed to make it better? The emotional affair, the planning, the lies? That's all okay as long as you hadn't fucked him yet? Stop it, her voice cracked. You're drunk. Actually, I'm not. Funny thing about serving champagne to 12 people, nobody drinks when they're watching a marriage die. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. But you'd know all about that champagne, wouldn't you? Special vintage, special glasses, special night? Tell me, what was the plan? Get him drunk enough to forget about Sarah and Michael? She slapped me. The sound echoed in the kitchen like a gunshot. We both stood there, shocked, her handprint burning on my cheek. You don't get to judge me, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You have no idea what it's been like. Year after year of the same routine, the same conversations, the same everything. When was the last time you really saw me? Really talked to me? Oh, I'm sorry, I spat back. I was too busy working 60-hour weeks to keep the garage running, too busy making sure we could afford this house, your car, your shopping trips. My mistake for thinking stability meant something. It means nothing if you're dying inside, she was shouting now, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. David listens to me, he sees me, he dash. He's married, I roared, finally losing control. He has children. I was your husband. 15 years, Katie. 15 fucking years, and you threw it away for some middle manager who sends you heart emojis and books hotel rooms. At least he made me feel alive again. The words hung between us like poison. I could see the moment she realized what she'd said, her hand flying to her mouth, but it was too late. Alive, I repeated, my voice dropping to a whisper. Well, I hope it was worth it. Because tomorrow I'm calling Sarah. That's his wife's name, by the way. Nice profile picture, their whole family together at Christmas. I'm going to tell her everything, every text, every planned meeting, every lie. Paul, please. She reached for me, but I stepped back. We can work through this. We can get counseling. I'll end it with him, I swear. You already did. I turned the laptop so she could see his LinkedIn status. Out of office. Family emergency. Looks like David made his choice the moment things got complicated, just like I'm making mine. I picked up her suitcase from where I'd left it by the stairs. Pack what you need for tonight. I'll have the rest sent to wherever you end up. And Katie? I met her eyes one last time. I hope he was worth losing everything for. The sound of Katie's car fading into the night left a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I sat in the dark kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and spilled champagne, her final words echoing in my head. At least he made me feel alive again. My phone was still off. I turned it on, watching as messages flooded in. Concerned friends, family offering support. But the one I was looking for came from an unknown number. I'm sorry. Please don't contact my family. We can talk about this. David, finding his courage now that the storm had passed, I opened my laptop again, staring at the happy family photos. Sarah, his wife, had the kind of smile that reached her eyes. The kids were gap-toothed and grinning in their Disney World pictures. A perfect family Christmas card waiting to be shattered by a single phone call. The cursor blinked in the email composition window. I had drafted everything, screenshots of messages, hotel confirmations, everything that would destroy David's comfortable life, just like he'd helped destroy mine. One click, and his world would burn too. But as I sat there, something Katie said kept nagging at me. Not about feeling alive, that still felt like a knife in my gut. No, it was what she'd said about routine, about sameness, about dying inside while looking perfectly fine on the outside. I thought about Sarah, David's wife. Did she feel the same way? Was she also dying inside, going through the motions of a perfect family life? Would my revenge just be adding another layer of pain to someone already suffering? The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Officially tomorrow. Officially the first day of my new life without Katie. I closed the laptop without sending the email. Instead, I opened my contacts and dialed Mike's number. He answered on the first ring, despite the hour. "I need a favor," I said, my voice steady now. "That client of yours, the divorce attorney?" "Paul?" Mike's voice was careful. "Are you sure you don't want to take some time, think things through?" I looked around the kitchen, at the shattered remnants of Katie's romantic evening, at 15 years of memories reduced to broken glass and spilled champagne. "I'm done thinking," I replied, "but I want to do this right, clean, no collateral damage." "What about David? His wife?" I stood up, finally ready to clean up the mess on the floor. "He's not worth it. Neither of them are. I want my life back, Mike. What's left of it, anyway?" "Okay," he said after a long pause. "I'll make the call first thing tomorrow. But Paul, come stay with us tonight. You shouldn't be alone in that house." I almost refused out of habit, that male pride thing about showing weakness. But maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe always being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never needed help, had helped lead to this moment. "Yeah," I said, surprising both of us. "Yeah, I'd like that." As I packed an overnight bag, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror, still wearing that suit she bought me, but something was different in my face, something harder in the eyes, but clearer too. Like finally seeing the truth about your life burns away all the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. I left the broken glass where it was. Let Katie clean it up when she came for her things. Sometimes a mess needs to be seen before it can be properly dealt with. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd start dealing with everything else. Mike's divorce attorney, Richard, didn't look anything like I expected. No shark smile, no expensive suit. Just a middle-aged guy with reading glasses and a coffee stain on his tie. The kind of man you'd trust to fix your car, which I guess made sense in its own way. "The good news," he said, spreading papers across his desk, "is that you have everything documented. Text messages, hotel bookings, restaurant reservations. It's all clear evidence of intended infidelity, even if they hadn't—" He trailed off, glancing at me. "Even if they hadn't fucked yet?" I finished for him. It was getting easier to say things like that. Amazing how quickly profanity becomes a comfort language when your life falls apart. "Right." He shuffled some papers. "The better news is that your business predates the marriage, and you've kept excellent records. The garage is solely yours." I thought about all those nights Katie had complained about my obsessive bookkeeping. Funny how things work out. "What about the house?" "Joint property, but—" He pulled out more papers. "Given the circumstances and your documentation of financial contributions, we have a strong case for primary ownership. You've paid the majority of the mortgage from your business income." The rest of the meeting was a blur of legal terms and signatures, division of assets, separation agreement, filing procedures, each signature another nail in the coffin of my marriage. When I got back to Mike's place, I was still staying in his guest room, there were 3 missed calls from Katie and a text, "Need to get more of my things. When is good?" I forwarded it to Richard, who responded immediately. "All communication through me from now on. I'll handle it." That night, I sat on Mike's back porch with a beer, scrolling through my phone. Katie had already changed her relationship status on Facebook. No more "married to Paul Reynolds." Just blank, empty, like the last 15 years could be erased with a click. Sarah, on the other hand, David's wife, still had a perfect family profile. Happy photos, loving updates. I hoped it stayed that way, not for David's sake, but for those gap-toothed kids in the Disney World photos. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I know what you did with my wife." Then another. "You'll regret this." I actually laughed out loud. David finding his courage in angry texts now that his comfortable life was falling apart. I forwarded the messages to Richard without responding. Let the lawyers handle it. I had more important things to do, like figuring out who Paul Reynolds was without Katie, like remembering how to sleep alone in a bed that suddenly felt too big, like learning to be okay with the silence in rooms that used to be filled with "I love you" and "have a good day," and all those other lies that sound like truth until they're not. I finished my beer and opened my laptop. Time to focus on what I could control. The garage needed a new accounting system. The house needed repairs I'd been putting off. Life needed rebuilding, one methodical step at a time. David could rage all he wanted. Katie could play the victim to whoever would listen. I had documentation, lawyers, and most importantly, the cold clarity that comes with knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life. Sometimes it's about rebuilding your own, better and stronger than before. One signature, one decision, one day at a time. They say karma has a way of working things out. What they don't tell you is sometimes you get a front row seat to watch it happen. I was at the garage when Mike called. "Paul, you need to check your email, now." There it was, a forwarded message from Sarah, David's wife, to Richard. She'd found everything on her own, the deleted texts, the hotel receipts, the restaurant booking. Turns out I wasn't the only one who knew how to check shared accounts. "Mr. Reynolds," her message read, "I understand you chose not to contact me about my husband's involvement with your wife. I want you to know I found out anyway, and I appreciate your discretion. David will be receiving divorce papers this afternoon. I thought you should know." I sat there in my office reading and rereading those words. Somewhere across town, David's perfect life was imploding, and I hadn't had to lift a finger. The karma show wasn't over. Later that day, David showed up at the garage. I saw him through my office window, pacing in the parking lot like a caged animal. When he finally came in, he looked nothing like his LinkedIn profile picture. "You son of a bitch," he started, but I cut him off. "My lawyer's number is on the wall behind you," I said, not looking up from my paperwork. All communication should go through him. "You think you're so smart?" His voice was shaking. "You had to make a big show at the restaurant, didn't you? Had to be the big man?" I finally looked up. "Actually, David, I didn't do anything. You did it all yourself. Check your phone. I bet Sarah's trying to reach you right now." The color drained from his face as he pulled out his phone. I watched him scroll through what I assumed were messages from his wife. Each swipe of his thumb seemed to age him another year. "How?" he started. "Shared accounts," I said, turning back to my work. "Funny how those work, isn't it? Now, unless you need your oil changed, I have a business to run." He stood there for a moment longer, deflated, all his rage turned to ash. Then he walked out, shoulders slumped, looking every bit the defeated man he was. That evening, I met with Richard again. The divorce proceedings were moving forward smoothly. Katie hadn't contested anything, probably too busy dealing with her own fallout. David had apparently taken a leave of absence from work. Their perfect little affair had crumbled under the weight of reality. "One last thing," Richard said, sliding a final document across his desk. "Your wife's lawyer sent this over. She's not asking for anything from the garage. Says she knows how much it means to you." I stared at the paper. It was the first decent thing she'd done since this all started. Maybe the last decent thing she'd do as my wife. "Sign here," Richard pointed. "And Paul?" "Sometimes the best revenge is just living well." I signed my name, the same signature I'd used on our marriage license 15 years ago, but this time it didn't feel like a promise. It felt like freedom. The day I moved back into our house, my house now, was the day Katie's sister Emma came to get the last of her things. I'd been staying at Mike's for 3 weeks, letting her pack up her life in peace. Some things are better done without an audience. "She's not doing well," Emma said, standing awkwardly in the kitchen where it had all started. The broken glass was long gone, but you could still see faint champagne stains in the grout. Some marks don't wash away easily. "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, sorting through mail that had piled up. Bills, advertisements, a letter from Katie I hadn't opened. "Paul." Emma hesitated. "David's wife took everything. Their house, their savings, even his car. He's basically living in a motel now." I looked up from the mail. "Is this supposed to make me feel bad?" "No, she sighed. "Katie thought she was trading up, you know? Moving from a mechanic to a big-shot sales manager. Now she's lost everything, and he can't even afford to take her to dinner." I had to laugh at that. Guess she should have checked his financial statements before blowing up her life. Emma picked up the last box, photo albums Katie had left behind. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, not telling his wife, letting it all come out naturally. It was classier than what they deserved." After she left, I walked through the house. It felt different now. Emptier, but not in a bad way. Like a canvas cleared for something new. I took down the wedding photos, the vacation snapshots, all the memories that didn't belong to just me. Each blank space on the wall felt like taking back another piece of myself. My phone buzzed, a text from Mike. "Guy's night's still on." I looked around at the half-empty house, at the spaces waiting to be filled with whatever came next. "Yeah," I texted back, "but not at Murphy's." Murphy's had been our regular spot, Katie and me, Mike and Sarah, all our friends. Too many memories there, too many familiar faces who'd give me those pitying looks I'd grown to hate. "New place on 4th, Mike suggested. "Never been there before." That's when it hit me. I could go anywhere now, do anything. Every restaurant in town wasn't colored by 15 years of history. Every Friday night wasn't pre-scheduled with couples dinners and movie nights. I picked up Katie's letter, still unopened. Whatever was in it, apologies, explanations, accusations, didn't matter anymore. I dropped it in the trash unopened. Some chapters don't need a proper ending to be over. "New place sounds perfect," I texted Mike. Then, after a moment, "Invite Tom and his brother too. Time to meet some new people." I grabbed my keys and wallet, caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. 3 weeks had changed me, or maybe just revealed who I'd been all along. The comfortable softness of marriage had been replaced by something leaner, sharper. My eyes looked clearer, like the fog of comfortable lies had finally lifted. The garage was doing better than ever. Turned out focusing on work was great therapy. I'd even hired 2 new mechanics, expanding into performance upgrades instead of just repairs. Sometimes you have to break something down completely before you can rebuild it better. As I locked up the house, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number, probably Katie or David with more drama. I blocked it without reading the message. Their story wasn't my story anymore. Time to write my own. 6 months later, I found myself back at Le Petit Jardin. Not for any dramatic reason. Mike was celebrating his promotion, and his wife Sarah had picked the place. Life has a sense of humor like that. The maitre d' recognized me. I saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the careful way he said, "Welcome back, Mr. Reynolds." But this time, I was just another customer. No special arrangements, no elaborate setups. Just dinner with friends. Our table was on the opposite side from where it had happened. Still, I could see that spot clearly, the place where my marriage had publicly ended. It felt like watching a scene from someone else's life now. "You okay?" Mike asked quietly as we sat down. "We can go somewhere else." I picked up the wine list, genuinely smiling. I'm good, actually better than good. And I was. The garage had expanded, 3 new mechanics, a specialized performance division, and a waiting list for custom work. I'd bought out the empty building next door, planning to double our workspace. Turns out focusing on yourself does wonders for business. I'd heard about Katie through the grapevine. She'd moved to another city, taken a job with less pay but more creative freedom, whatever that meant. David had tried to reconcile with his wife, but Sarah, the other Sarah, not Mike's wife, had apparently found her own version of happiness without him. Sometimes karma really does keep receipts. "Paul?" a voice from the past. I looked up to see the restaurant manager, the same one who'd helped me modify Katie's reservation that night. "Your usual table is available, if you'd prefer." "This one's perfect," I cut in gently, "but thanks." Later, as we finished our meals, Mike raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, but I shook my head. "To knowing your own worth," I corrected him. "That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break you. If you're lucky, if you're strong enough, it rebuilds you. Better, stronger, clearer about who you are and what you deserve." Walking out later, I paused in the entrance. 6 months ago, I'd walked out of here a different man, hurt, angry, burning with revenge. Now I walked out as just myself, Paul Reynolds, mechanic, business owner, friend, no longer a husband, but somehow more complete than I'd ever been wearing that ring. My phone buzzed. A text from Julie, the lawyer I'd been seeing for a few weeks. Nothing serious, just coffee and conversation. Real conversation, the kind where you actually say what you mean instead of what you think the other person wants to hear. "How was dinner?" she'd written. I looked back at the restaurant one last time before replying, "Better than expected, much better." The night air was cool and clean, full of possibility. Somewhere across town, in some other fancy restaurant, maybe Katie was planning another unforgettable evening with someone new. Maybe David was trying to rebuild his life from a motel room. Maybe their karma was still working itself out. But standing there, keys in hand, healing scars in my heart, I realized something profound. I didn't care anymore. Their story wasn't my story. Their choices weren't my burden. I had my own story to write. And this time, I was holding the pen.